One of the questions I get asked most often is how to find good foraging spots. This can be really difficult because, first of all, it's illegal to harvest in a lot of public lands, like city parks, for example. Sometimes it requires weird permitting, like in the case of Forest Service land. And private property, like most people don't want you picking things on their land without their permission. There's also pollution and contamination, like car exhaust, pet waste, air pollution from factories, and also like mining pollution from 100 years ago. And then also like sometimes when you harvest somewhere, there's like 100 other people harvesting that same thing, and you just don't want to have a big impact on that area. So all these things coalesce to make it pretty hard to like be ethical and responsible in your harvesting and also legal. So let's talk about some creative tips on how we can find really cool, great, respectful foraging spots. A little bit of background on me. I have been foraging in Washington State for about 16 years, technically my whole life, because I harvested a lot of blackberries as a child with my parents. 7 years of that time, I lived in the city of Seattle in an apartment, and I did not have a garden. I have never owned land, and I also did not own a car for most of my foraging time. So those are a lot of limits on finding foraging spots and having access to foraging spots. So I learned to get really creative about where I forage. So let's share these 5 tips. Tip number 1 is to get in touch with local organic farms to see if you can come harvest weeds from the farm. I've been to a lot of organic farms that have a ton of dandelion, a ton of chickweed, and all kinds of other medicinal and edible weeds that they just want to remove anyway. So you can actually help them out by coming to rip some of them out, and you can get really good quality organic, which a lot of things like in city parks and stuff aren't organic. They spray a bunch of pesticides on it anyway. So that can actually be a really reliable and good place to forage things. Now the question is like, how do you find these places? How do you contact them? Literally just find websites, like search Google Maps in your area for organic farms, go to the farmer's market, locate a couple of local farms that are within driving distance, and then contact them, email them, or talk to them directly at the farmer's market. Some of them may never respond. Some of them might invite you out. Another really good tip for this is to specifically go to you-pick farms that are already open to the public. These types of farms might be more receptive to having strangers come visit their farm. Tip number 2 for people who do not own land, like myself, is to network with local private landowners that own land. Now, here's the thing about medicinal plants. A lot of people don't know that they're medicinal, aren't going to use them anyway, and sometimes with certain plants don't even want them on their property to begin with. A lot of people use a lot of pesticides, which maybe you don't want to harvest if they use pesticides, but a lot of people are out there like spending a lot of time and energy to pull these things out of their yard. So why can't you use them, right? For example, in my area, dwarf mallow is super common weed in people's yards, and it's one of my favorite medicinal plants. So I literally can just go anywhere, any one of my friends' houses, they all have it, and dig out dwarf mallow whenever I want. So that brings me to the first category of people to reach out to, which is friends and family. That's kind of the easiest thing. You know who has property and usually what property. Maybe you've been there. And literally you just invite yourself over and be like, hey, can I harvest some of the dandelion out of your yard, or some of the dwarf mallow, or hey, it looks like you have a good chickweed patch. Do you mind if I help myself to that? I'd love to share whatever I'm making with you. That's another good way to kind of bargain with them. Another great way is to post on Buy Nothing groups. I specifically love Buy Nothing because it's a lot of spirit of like sharing and giving, which are the kind of people that are more likely going to want to host you on their property to come harvest something. You can post pictures of what you're looking for because a lot of people don't know that they have what they have in their garden, and be like, hey guys, I want to harvest some bitter cress. Here's a picture of it. Let me know if you have a bunch in your yard, and PS, like I would prefer organic yards. You can also post on other types of forums. I live in a small town, and we have like a local Facebook group that people post on about events and stuff, or there's also one in the next town over, which is a slightly larger town, and that kind of place would be the perfect place. There's even a local, I live in a really small town, y'all. There's even a local billboard, like post board, where people post flyers at the post office, and that would be another place you could literally make a flyer with your little face on it and be like, hey guys, I'm looking for apples. Does anybody have any extra? And those kind of things are really great to build community with your local people. Another thing that I have done before is literally knock on the door of people that have something that I can see in their yard that I probably think that they're not going to want to use anyway. Hawthorn is a great example of this. A lot of people have hawthorn trees. They don't know what it is, and hawthorn berries aren't very tasty, and if you're not an herbalist, you probably aren't appreciating what they are and how amazingly beneficial they are. So knock on that person's door or even put something in their mailbox. Sometimes when I'm feeling shy, I like to literally just wait until I see them outside mowing the lawn and be like, oh, hey, and then talk to them then. And you can also offer to share what you make again, and that can be an educational opportunity for people to learn what they do have in their yards. That kind of sums it up for private land ownership, and there are, I'm sure, are other ways in your community via networking that you'll figure out. Tip number 4 is to scavenge. Now, when I say scavenging for like plant material, like wild plants, what I mean is sometimes people are trimming trees or a branch has fallen off, or maybe a developing company is just going to raise a property to the ground and like literally cut out all the grass and the plants. If you know that's going to happen, that is a great opportunity to rescue some plant material from that area. A while back, I was literally like taking a walk at 5 in the morning, and there was these city gardeners trimming the Oregon grape bushes, and there was like 6-foot tall canes, and there was a whole truck full. So I took as much as I could carry, like physically carry home with me, and made a ton of medicine for free, which is amazing. And also when people are cutting other things that we use the barks of, fantastic. So kind of in the spring and fall is when people start to trim their trees, and those are great opportunities to go looking for bark specifically. Another time that I really clearly remember having a great scavenging find is I was living in Seattle, and they were raising the property next door to build one of those really ugly like 4-pack duplex or quadruplex, I guess. And they had Solomon seal. It was like this old house, and they had this huge Solomon seal in the backyard. And I knew that the workers were coming the next day to literally like bulldoze the entire thing. So I asked one of the construction workers, hey, do you mind if I dig that up? It's like medicinal and I would love to use it. And he said, yeah, sure, whatever. He didn't care. So I dug the entire thing up and got like 10 pounds of Solomon seal root. I planted some, I dried some, I tinctured some. And Solomon seal root, for reference, is actually pretty expensive to buy on the market, like from Pacific Botanicals or Mountain Rose Herb. So it's a fantastic herb to scavenge. And then I also had plants in my yard that I then like transferred to a different garden in the future and had it in perpetuity for free, basically. All right, you made it to the end. I want to give a couple of bonus tips. First of all, food forests, which are basically like public gardens with fruit trees and herbs and all kinds of things that are open for public harvest. Those types of projects are becoming much more popular. Definitely, if there's something like this going on in your neighborhood, go and support it, donate to it, go visit it, volunteer. These things are amazing community resources, and they allow people to get free foods and medicines in their neighborhoods. And it's also like legal and clean, and it's amazing. The Beacon Food Forest, which is a project that I've been involved in for a long time because I lived on Beacon Hill for 7 years. That project is absolutely amazing, and if you're in the Seattle area, definitely go visit it. It's in Jefferson Park, and it's called the Beacon Food Forest. There's also one in Duval now, apparently, that I haven't gotten visited. And there's also a bunch of like local gardens in general that might have like plots and then like a common area. So you could rent out a plot or just talk to people and ask like, hey, can I come dig up weeds from the common area? Fantastic. Also, Forest Service land and DNR land. DNR stands for the Department of Public Resources, which is a state-run entity in Washington. And I'm not sure about other states, so you got to look it up. But those lands have varying restrictions based on where they are. But in general, for personal use, people can harvest things there. Some U.S. Forest Service districts require a permit and some do not. So you'll just have to look up your local district or wherever you are. You can call the ranger station or go in and ask what their requirements are for foraging. And those can be pretty reliable for harvesting a lot of different things. I harvest fireweed usually on Forest Service land and things like goldenrod and like fir tips and pine tips and stuff like that. There's a lot of those in our forests, and in clear cuts especially is where you're going to find fireweed and goldenrod. So those plants are super abundant and easy to find, and generally they don't care if you're harvesting them. So those are my 5 tips on foraging. Please let us know in the comments if you have any of your own. Thanks. I also wanted to let you guys know that I have a book about foraging medicinal plants in the Pacific Northwest. It just came out in April 2024, and it has 35 things that you can harvest that are super common in the Pacific Northwest. It also has recipes with pictures and how to harvest. That's my friend. And it also has really amazing pictures on how to identify these plants. Here is the page on gumweed or grindelia. And I like to include things like how the seeds are shaped and how the leaves are shaped and how the basil leaves are shaped, so that you can identify the plants more easily in the field. So if this looks really cool to you, you can check it out. It's for sale on Amazon and from my publisher, Mountaineers.